Hey folks, Steve-O here. As promised, this is the recorded version of the Sketchup class that we gave, or I guess I should say the re-recorded version, as the original couldn't be used. So I'm going to guide you through how to get started with Sketchup, which is a really amazing 3D modeling tool, very simple to get started with. When you first install Sketchup, you are going to be facing this splash screen, and in fact what you're going to have to actually do is click Choose Template to see this. I've already done that, and you can see that there's a number of templates here. They all feature different scale or measurements. We're going to go with the simple template. Feel free to poke around if you want to, but just to get SketchUp set up so we can begin working, I recommend that we start with this template. And once you've selected it, simply click Start Using SketchUp, and in a minute it should load. There we are. We're going to close the instructor, and in fact I am going to close this because you want to see what you're going to be dealing with the first time you use it. And you're going to be looking at this this person looking wistfully away into the horizon. We don't really need her or him. I'm not really sure what that is. So we're going to delete it. And in case you're wondering how I deleted it, I like to use shortcut keys, and I recommend that you learn at least the basic shortcut keys. And the shortcut key for the selection tool, and I'll undo this so you can see it, is the space bar. You can also get it up here, as you can see that. So I hit the space bar, it defaulted to the select tool. Click this, and away she or he it goes. And now we're sitting here staring at a blank canvas, and the first thing you probably want to do is get your tools set up with the common tools that we're going to use. You go up here, that's it, view, toolbars. There's the getting started. I'm going to go with the large tool set and ixnay on the get it started. This is most of what we'll need, at least for this part of the tutorial. So maybe I want to do this too. Toolbars, let's see. Maybe we'll do some shadows later. We'll put that up there. Anything else I'm going to want? Let's see, views. Yep, definitely going to want views. Alright. So here we go. I've got my views, shadows in case we start to do some rendering later, and the basic tools that I'm going to be using. There's a couple of different ways to look around in Shortcut. Basically, there's the pan tool, which can be accessed through H, and you can see that it's this little hand here. Alright. And there's a tool to rotate around your view, and you get that by pressing O, and that gives you this tool over here. But the first thing we're going to do is dive right into how to make some basic geometry. I think a lot of you folks are going to probably be using this for floor plans. So I think what we should probably do is make a basic 4x8 flat utilizing 2x3 construction, and the first step in that is to go up here to this rectangle tool. Alright, so we've got that, and what we're going to do is click, hold it, drag out until we've got the basic shape of a rectangle, let that go. And a little thing that I do, and everybody uses SketchUp a little bit differently, but this is what works for me. For instance, if I want to make a 2x3 that's 8 feet long, I'm going to hit the P key for the push-pull tool, and then you can see as I mouse over here that it starts to select that face. If I click on that, let it go, and then pull up, click again to complete the action, you can see that I've essentially created a block, which of course is nowhere near 2x3. So I'm going to have to take this, and I'm going to have to measure this down. So I hit the T key, which brings up my tape measure. That's also available over here. Whoops, click by accident. It's also available over there. And I'm going to grab a point and click, and then I'm going to drag it out along this axis. And SketchUp's pretty smart. It has what's called an inference engine, and it means just that. It tries to infer what you're doing. So if I drag this along this axis, it'll actually try to stick to that. And before I click again to complete my measurement, I'm going to put in 8, literally just type 8 and single quotation for feet. And you can see down in the right hand corner, length is now 8 feet. When I click enter, it's going to give me a little guide mark, and you can see that right here. I'll bring up the select tool so I can point at it. Again, I hit space for select, and there's my guide mark right there. So now I need to take this piece that I'm making and make it only that long, so we're at least 8 feet. Then we'll work on our other measurements. So I'm going to hit P to bring up my push-pull tool. I'm going to click on that face, and then I'm going to drag it down. I'm going to use my mouse wheel to zoom in, and you can see it's pretty smart. it knows that I want to snap to the guide point if I put it over there. I click again to complete the action, and my block of wood is at least now 8 feet long. Of course, now I need to make it a 2x3, right? So, once again, I hit T to bring up my tape measure tool. I click on an endpoint, and my next measurement, we'll say it's going to be 2.5. You can see where it says it types 2.5 in the right-hand corner there. Then I use the quotation mark, double quotations for inches, and it's now just created another guide point for me. And you can see that initially the scale starts very big, so we'll start zooming in on that. Once again, I hit my P key, and you can see once the push-pull tool is selected, as I mouse over, without clicking mind you, but as I mouse over, it'll show me what face I'm about to modify. So I'm going to grab this face, I'm going to click once, I'm going to zoom in again, because I want to get that guide point. There it is. It snaps it right to it. I click again to complete the action. Now we're getting somewhere, right? You can see as we've moved the piece away from our initial reference guide that the tape measure created, that it's now just floating there. I like to clean things up a little bit, so occasionally I'll go here to edit and click delete guides, and I'll get rid of any guides that I've created thus far. Bear in mind that's going to delete all the guides that you've created on a piece, so don't do that unless you're sure you don't need them anymore. So I'm going to hit the O key to bring up my little rotate around tool. I'm sure there's a better name for that, but that's what I call it. I'm going to mouse wheel zoom in, because I just want to get a better view of what I'm working on. And of course, we all know a 2x3 isn't actually 2x3, it's 2.5 inches by 1.5 inches. So my next measurement is going to be that 1.5. I'm going to come up from this direction. Again, I click once on the endpoint, I start dragging along this axis so the inference engine can infer what I'm trying to do. And then, to get the exact measurement I want, I go ahead and simply type 1.5 inches. And that gives me my next reference point. You can barely see it, it's down there. I'll zoom in a second. My push-pull tool, again. Oops, went too far. Snap to guide point, and you can see that it's snapped to the guide point because it actually brings up that little dialog box you can see there on the bottom. And look at that. I've now made an 8-foot-long 2x3 that's straighter than any piece of Home Depot lumber you'll ever see. I'm going to delete guides again. And now that I have my first 2x3 created, and this is important, if I go ahead, for instance, and I don't make this a group, and I'll show you that in a second, but if I just leave this the way it is, what I'm actually doing is selecting individual edges or faces. So let me zoom in here. This is a face, this is an edge. You can modify these by accident. So to treat this as one single piece, what I'm going to do here is drag my select box around it, and by clicking and encompassing this in the selection box, again I use space to bring up the select tool, you can see that it's highlighted every piece, every individual face and edge of this piece that we're creating. So then mousing over it, I right click and I say make group. And now it knows when I click on this, I'm not clicking on the individual components that have made up this piece, I'm treating this piece as one group. And that means I'm not going to screw things up later when I start editing other things. Now let's go back to this menu for a second because there's something very important here. We usually deal with groups. You can also see I could have made this a component. Here's the difference between the two. If I make this a component, every time I copy that component, if I modify the original or any other component, it modifies all of them. That can be very handy when done on purpose. If not done on purpose, that can be very frustrating. We're going to treat this as a group. We'll go into some of these other menu options later, but for now we've created our first 2x3. As you know, we're going to need 2 of these that are 8 feet long. So here's a little trick. Your first inclination is probably going to be to copy and paste this, right? And we could do that, we absolutely could. I find it easier as part of my workflow to utilize a feature of the move tool. Now I'm going to get myself in a place where I can see this a little bit better. And first things first, I'm going to stand this up on edge. Because that's just the way my brain's working as I'm creating this piece. So I need to rotate this. The shortcut key for the rotate tool is Q, and you can see that brings up that tool. You can also get it here. You can see that I've just highlighted its rotate. So I'm going to click on the face that I want to rotate on, and the way the rotate tool works is, and I'll hit escape so we can see this again, it tries to infer what axis or face you're attempting to rotate on. This is the one I want on. You click once, I pull away on the axis that I want to rotate on. This creates sort of a leverage handle of sorts. When I click again, you can see, well, nothing happened. But what it's done is it's locked in the axis that I wish to rotate on. And now when I do this, I can see that I can rotate it on the blue axis. Couple different ways you can do that. As you create more complicated models, it may become more difficult to rotate something, for instance, exactly 90 degrees as I've just done. So let me go back. Let's undo what I did. I'm going to click again on the face that I wish to rotate on. And you can see as I pull away, it tries to infer that I'm on the red axis. That's correct. So I'm going to very slowly make sure that that's there. And you can see that it says on red axis. So Sketchup is telling me, hey, this is what I infer you to be doing. Again, now I click again. Now what I can do is simply type in 90 for 90 degrees. Oops, I just typed in 09 by accident. Let's try it again. 90. And I accomplish the same thing, but I know that I've rotated it exactly 90 degrees. That can be very handy when you're working with more complex models. So do remember that trick. So here we go. Now, as I was saying before, you may be tempted to copy and paste. We're not going to do that. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to use the Move tool. We bring up the Move tool by hitting M. And you can see that I can now move this. All right, I'm going to undo. Whoops. Stupid me. There we go. We've got the Move tool. This is something kind of special about the Move tool. If I click the Control key, you can see a little plus just appeared. And what that's telling me is I'm going to move not this piece, but move an exact instance of this piece. So I'm going to go to the endpoint here, and you can see that it highlights endpoint. And now because I've hit Control and that little plus sign has appeared, when I click and begin my move, it actually moves an exact duplicate of that piece. Very, very handy function. If you try to Control C, Control V, which of course is the shortcut for copy paste, you can also get that from the edit menu. It's going to be more difficult for you to make exact moves of the exact instance of the piece that you're doing. This will make sense once you start playing with it. But here we go. We've got two pieces. Obviously, my next piece, though, if I'm to create a wall flat, a standard 4x8 wall flat, is I'm going to need a 4-foot piece. At least that's how I build them. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to hit Control. I'm going to move a copy of this again. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this one and I'm going to rotate it. And I'm going to rotate it on this axis. You can see I'm pulling out there. I'm going to rotate that 90 degrees. And again, just to summarize, I'll go back and I'll do this again just so it kind of sits in there. To use the rotate tool, which we can use by shortcut key Q or by simply clicking here in the tool set, we pick the face or the edge that we're going to rotate on in this case. We click once, we drag out on the axis that we wish to use as a handle. We click again, and now at this point we can either type in the degree of rotation or we can simply drag the mouse. I'm going to type in 90 because I find that's a little more precise. And we can see that we've got a cross piece here. I'm going to use the Move key to get this over here. And what I'm going to do is use the H key, which again is pan. Of course, you can get that right here. And I'm going to get myself in a position where I can better move this. To join these pieces exactly, at least on this edge, I hit M to move, and I wait till I mouse over this corner and it says Endpoint and Group. I click it, mouse key as I snap in, I bring it to the endpoint in this group, and you can see that I'm joined exactly right there. Of course, I have one major problem. This is still too long. So, I hit space to bring up my select key. Now, because I've made this a group, I can't simply edit the length without doing this. Right click and go to Edit Group. And you can see that this creates a separate bounding box that tells me I'm now editing a group. I'll use my push-pull key, push-pull tool, I say that too many times too fast, to grab this face, and I'm going to snap it to the endpoint of this group. It says endpoint outside active. Active being the piece that I'm working on, the group that I'm editing. And that's perfectly fine because I want to snap it to this endpoint right here, which is this other 2x3 that we're creating. So I go ahead and click that. I click the space to bring up select again. As long as we're just using the select key, we can't really break any geometry that we're doing. We're simply selecting it. And when I select away again, you can see that I've now edited this group. So let's take a quick sanity check on our measurements, because you can see that something's about to go wrong, and that's okay, it's on purpose. We are not 4 feet long here. Well, of course not, because I never told it to make it 4 feet. So let's fix that. Let's bring up our T key for tape measure. We'll start dragging along this piece that we're working on. Here we go. Hopefully Google's not going to be too cantankerous for a mouse pad. Alright. And you can see now it automatically snapped right to the guide point. It said, hey, I know what you're trying to do now, because we're working in the group that we're editing. I'm going to go ahead and delete those guys now that I have them. Just to be precise, I'll bring up my tape measure one more time. Make sure I'm exactly 4 feet. And I do that by clicking on this endpoint and then dragging it to this endpoint. And I can see that I'm exactly 4 feet. So we're looking great here. Of course, now I'm going to have to move this piece to here, right? Of course. And you can see when I mouse over my move key, when I mouse over the endpoint, it says, hey, are you trying to snap to this? I say, yep, I click. And we go to there. Just delete guides again. Keep things neat. And you can see, and again, this part of the insanity is by design, that we've got a slight problem here. I want this to be 8 feet long entirely. But I know, because I've made this mistake, that if I take this, hit my move key, bring it down here, if you're having trouble finding where, if you're having trouble getting Sketchup to snap to the exact thing that you want, you can get around that more often than not by simply zooming way in, and you can see that that time it worked. I was trying to get it to sit on that piece right there, and it didn't want to. But by zooming in, I finally got the inference engine to infer what I'm doing. Now I'm going to move this again. All of this is just an example. I hit Control because I want to create an instance. We'll move him out there. That time it snapped right in. Alright, so I've got my frame here. But those of you who have done this before are going to say, wait a minute, that's not going to be 8 feet. That's going to be over 8 feet. And it is. It's 8 feet 3 inches. Why? Because we got 1.5 inches on each of these members. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move you out of the way. And this is just more repetition so we get used to editing groups and using our tape measure as a reference tool. Alright. So let's go in here, click Edit Group, Tape Measure, Endpoint. So we need to be 93 inches long on this cross member, right? Let's see. Do a quick sanity check. Right. Cool. I think we're almost there. You can see that I'm joining these guys together now. I'm going to do a quick check. Make sure I got to where I needed to be. Yep, 8 feet long. I had to take 3 inches off of that 2x3. Anyone who's built a wall flat before knows exactly what I'm talking about. Edit group. Let's make this guy. I'm going to go over here. Hey, look at that. We've got our frame. Alright, but of course now we're going to need to put a sheet on there, right? We're gonna have to skin it. So what's the easiest way to do it in this case? Well, we've got these guys all separated out as groups, so we can cheat a little bit. We can grab the rectangle tool, and we can come from this corner, click here, scroll back, pan. Oh, you're saying, what happened? You just ruined your rectangle. Well, Google's pretty smart. If I have to pan or zoom around while I'm in the middle of doing something, when I go back to my rectangle tool, it's going to know that that was the last action I was trying to do. It saves my place, so to speak, because it understands that we may have to look around a little bit to get certain things done. So I'm going to use the pull tool, bring it up. That is one thick piece of plywood we just created. So we're going to have to fix that, aren't we? I'm going to assume that we're using Luan because we don't really want to hurt ourselves too badly. So I'm going to say it's 1/4 inch or 0.25 inches. There's my guide point. Come up here. And like I said, if it's giving you a hassle, just zoom in and it'll finally find it. There it is. You can see now it's snapped to that guide point. Excellent. I'm going to zoom back out again. using my two different view tools, pan and my rotate tool, which you can get through H and O shortcut keys respectively. And I have just created a wall flat. Look at that. I'm going to do one more thing though. I'm just going to go over here and make my life a little bit easier. I'm going to use my selection tool, hit spacebar. I'm going to drag over this way. And you can see a couple of things about the selection tool. The selection tool, believe it or not, knows whether you're clicking and dragging from left to right or from right to left. And it operates in two different ways depending on what you're doing. And you can see that actually gives you an indication that's operating differently, because if I go from right to left, I get this dotted line. If I go from left to right, I get this solid box. So let's try a couple of different things. I am going to encompass only that top sheet that I just created. And I'm going to select, and I'm going from left to right. I drag, I let go, and it grabs only the pieces that I've completely encompassed with the selection tool. However, if I go from right to left and grab that, you can see it's selected just about pretty much the whole piece. The reason being is the selection tool handles things a little bit differently depending on whether you're going left to right or right to left. If you're going right to left, anything that selection tool is touching, when you go ahead and encompass it, it's going to grab everything. You're more selective by going from left to right. It's going to grab only the pieces that you've completely encompassed. If that doesn't make sense, just play with it. You'll get it right away. I'm going to make this a group. So I've just now grouped that top sheet that I did, and the reason why I did that is I may want to pull that off at some point, and you can see now that I've grouped it, I can pull that right off, and I'm going to put it back right now. I'm going to go to the end point here. I'm going to snap that to that end point. Our piece is back together again. Perfect. We have just made a wall flat. Now we have to figure out what we're going to do with it, and then talk about more complicated geometry